for relationship matters, I'm opening the studio chat now so that I don't miss the important things. Caspar, it's,
I have it open.
you know how things work,
I do. Yes, sir.
I want to see if you still have blood pressure. So that's all. You're listening to What's Your Baseline? The show where we unpack the real world of enterprise architecture, process management, and everything that helps you build a smarter organization. We talk tools, techniques, and tough lessons learned, so you don't have to learn it the hard way. My name is Roland Wold. Grab a coffee. Let's go into it. Hey, Caspar, how you doing today?
Hey, Roland, I'm fine, actually. Just got back home after a nice trip a customer.
So fine 1 or fine 5? There's some scale in there.
It's Q4, so it's probably fine 3 right now. It's a bit hectic.
Okay, yeah, which also means you can't count because this episode obviously airs in January, so that's Q1. But you will be forgiven, Caspar. You will be forgiven.
Yeah, there's a difference between when you record something and when you publish it.
No, really?
Yeah. Or is this a live one? That's also good to know.
Yeah, well, too late. You're in it now.
That's too late. But I'm doing fine. How are you?
Good. So far so good. I'm building on my little empire for world domination, on the side.
Yeah.
So that's good. And on other notes, I started writing the third book because.
Oh, very good.
Because
Yeah.
Yeah.
I only have 2, so I need a third one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the stress test for the shelves behind you. How many of those green books can you place on it until it breaks?
Yeah, quite a few actually.
Yeah, well, we will see. I will test it out. I still got 88 ISBNs to go, so.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Yeah, we'll see. But anyways,
yes,
we do have speaking of publications, right? Which I would assume that my musings count as publications as well. We do have a guest today, Caspar.
Very
and
interesting.
I'd like to welcome Michael Hill from PEX, the Process Excellence Network, because I think, Michael, if I'm not mistaken, this is your main gig, right? To publish content and be a journalist and doing all those important fourth estate things. Is that correct?
That is true. You could say that. I think that's fair. Yeah, great to be here with you guys. Really excited to make my debut on the What's Your Baseline podcast. So yeah, thanks for having me, and yeah, bring it on.
You're welcome, and we're happy to have you. But maybe
Absolutely.
for those 3 people who do not follow Caspar, who put his PEX symbol still on his profile, if I'm not mistaken, even though it's almost 2 years old.
Yeah, it's on the newsletter logo.
Yeah, you should polish it up a little bit, Caspar. Just a friendly reminder.
I updated it to the one from the previous one. So.
Oh, okay. Well, good job, Caspar.
I was on their list twice, Roland. No, but I should clean it up. That's true.
But for those 3 people who don't know Michael and who don't know PEX, Michael, can you enlighten us a little bit? Talk a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, how you got here, and all those things so that people get to know you a little bit before we dive into the meat of the episode.
Yeah, sure. Great stuff. So yes, I'm Michael. I'm the editor of PEX Network, and I'll speak a bit about PEX Network in a moment. But so I'm pretty much to this day that we're recording, it's pretty much 2 years since I've been the editor of PEX Network. Bit of a serendipitous kind of start with PEX. I spent about 8 years previously covering cybersecurity. So again, real kind of tech focus, I guess you could say, but certainly focusing on cybersecurity, data security, all that data breach kind of stuff that we read a lot about. And that was kind of had been my day to day for the best part of 10 years, you could say. Did a few things before that in a few different industries, but a few things happened and worked out that I ended up being asked to come onto PEX Network, which has been running now for between 10 to 15 years, I think, in total. And it's gone through a few different kind of shifts and evolutions in its time, but essentially what it has always been and still is a media content platform, community platform for process excellence leaders. And that's kind of merging and evolving a bit into kind of your more business transformation leaders as well, and your AI leaders and automation leaders as well, is all kind of very much coming into the fore within that kind of wider tech space. A very exciting time. So it's been a very, exciting couple of years for me in particular, not only coming on and kind of learning a new industry, or certainly a new facet of an industry in terms of process excellence, but also seeing how all these other technologies are coming into play. But yeah, so we regularly publish a wide range of content on the site, and that covers ungated content, your kind of regular daily news articles, features, listicles, interviews with industry leaders, opinion pieces, right through to your more gated content, so industry reports, obviously white papers. We do a lot of webinars as well, and now virtual webinar series as well, which are, as you would imagine, panel discussions or kind of fireside chats that we run regularly. So a real mixture of gated and ungated content. Obviously we are a B2B publication as well, so we provide lead generation opportunities as well for a lot of the obviously great vendors that work in the space. But at the heart of what we are is a kind of a thought leadership led platform, right? And we're continually engaging with the community and trying to kind of keep our finger on the pulse and bring engaging content regularly to our audience of PEX leaders, transformation leaders, and trying to kind of be the source of not just news but content of what's going on in and around the industry.
Michael, sorry to interrupt you a little bit. I mean, before we pack the entire episode just in your introduction of PEX Network, the people also typically want to know who's the person behind the name. So give us a bit of a personal introduction, and also how did you get into journalism in the first place? I mean, that would be really interesting.
Sure. Good point. So I think it goes, well, way back when. I think I've always loved kind of, stories and storytelling, right? And even that kind of wider publishing of content and seeing, having an idea, seeing it through, building it and seeing it live. It's always kind of appealed to me. I always loved, writing and reading and telling stories, right? So I think where really took off for me was my university days. So I went to university in Kingston, which is just outside London, or Greater London University. Studied English Lit and Creative Writing. Great fun for 3 years. A lot of reading some of the classics, but also having the opportunity to be writing quite freely and doing that alongside all the usual fun and games of being a student, right? A lot of socializing and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it. So I always wanted to be in that kind of journalistic space. Came out of university, like a lot of people, trying to get a foot on the ladder, an internship, something in publishing, editorial. Found it very difficult, to be honest with you. I think a lot of people come out of university, certainly people I knew, thinking I want to be a journalist, right? I don't know if it's the Clark Kent factor or whatever. It seems like a fun job,
I don't know that many.
Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Maybe it's just me then. But I think it seems an appealing job. The reality sometimes is a bit different. I guess we'll touch on that maybe a bit later. But yeah, so anyway, long story short, struggled. Actually started my working life in insurance for a few years, if you can believe it, which was a bit different.
Maybe.
But yes, which kind of gave me a bit of a grounding into having a 9-to-5 job, right? Everyone's got to start somewhere and, having that discipline. But then eventually thought, right, I've had enough of this. I'm going to try and give this another go. Eventually landed a really cool internship where I was just going full-time forward, just writing content every day. Unpaid, but there you go. You've got to start, right? And that kind of was the catalyst for me. And that really kind of snowballed from one kind of career, well, one job to another in my career. Quite short-lived, but working through different kind of publishing roles, medical, law I did as well, University of Law. Before then, eventually stumbling onto the cybersecurity space. Again, quite luckily, just got reached out to for a job that was coming up. I had no background in cybersecurity, certainly not at a deep level in terms of the multifaceted thing that it is. But the role itself seemed appealing, coming on as a deputy editor of a quite a well-known cybersecurity publication. So kind of started at the deep end really and went for that, and kind of over 8 years kind of built a profile, I guess, and a reputation for myself as fairly respected cybersecurity writer and editor. Certainly a lot of learning involved, and I was by no means an expert. I think like a lot of journalists, you rely on the experts, right? And your role is a storyteller that try and facilitate that as best you can in a readable form, tapping into readers, audience trends and things like that. I think that's kind of where the skills kind of lie. And then, one thing led to another. I did that for 8 years, and there was an opportunity to come up initially to continue to be covering cybersecurity at the company that I'm actually working for now, that obviously owns PEX Network. There are a few different shifts quite early on, and I was actually then asked to kind of step into what became an open role on PEX Network, to kind of have a bit of a new journey, I guess, certainly a new challenge, but using a lot of the transferable skills that I built up, after the best part of 10 years of working in publishing, and a lot of the day to day would be the same, or was the same. So that's kind of fell into it really, and then kind of almost that, in terms of that kind of journey of starting to learn a new topic like I did with cybersecurity, kind of started again with process excellence. Maybe not entirely, because I think there are, again, certainly in terms of a lot of the technologies involved. Obviously, AI is very heavily used in cybersecurity and automation, and there's some crossovers and some similarity. Role of data and those kind of things.
So we'll get to that, Michael. And by the way, Caspar, I was tinkering with the idea of becoming a journalist in high school, and then I realized where the real alternative might be. I would have to drive a taxi cab in Frankfurt. And then I decided to join the military for 11 years, just for a little story arc. It's all the same.
I'll give you the arc. I actually was a journalist in university, and I wrote for the university newspaper for about 3 years, which was one of the most lucrative jobs I've had as a student. But you do learn how to write and be concise, which is a lost art, I would say, now.
I wrote a little bit, and that was then, for good reasons, lost in history. It's all good.
Michael, Roland and I, your friendly podcast host, we know exactly what PEX Network is and what PEX stands for, but there might be people out there that listen to this show that have maybe no idea. So could you take us through what PEX actually stands for, and PEX Network? What does it do, and what is it actually?
Yeah, sure. So obviously the PEX Network, the long name, Process Excellence Network, and like I say, traditionally it was very much set up to be traditional process excellence focus. Things like Lean Six Sigma and Agile and Lean and all those kind of things were the bread and butter, right? But essentially what it is, and what it's always kind of grown and evolved to be, is a community focused content platform, right? Where we look to bring as many people together who work in the space, who are leading process excellence efforts, normally leading teams, but not always, to build a community, like I say, of like-minded people that can come to us for content, for learning, to network with others, to meet others in the space. So that's always been the aim, and it still is. Things are always evolving and changing, and the type of content that we do now, and this is one of the things that I've been trying to kind of instill in the last couple of years I've been on the platform, has kind of diversified a bit, and we are trying to evolve not just into a general kind of community focused platform, but also a source of news, regular news. Something that I want for the platform is to be the source of where people who are in the space are process leaders get their news from, right? And there maybe isn't necessarily a dedicated news source out there that just focuses on process news, right? And I think that's something that we do and want to keep doing, and again that's a newer thing that's developed in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and there's obviously a huge overlap with the audience of this podcast and the stuff that Caspar and I do in real life, which is why I find it so interesting to have you on the show today. But PEX also, as an organization, you're obviously not just a publication, with a website. You obviously also organize events and conferences and all that type of stuff. How is that going?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I mean, so the way it works is kind of twofold, really. So we're kind of an offshoot, if you like, or a digital offshoot of a larger physical events company who run a lot of different conferences all over the world, and that's what they do in various different areas. And they run a series that's kind of related to PEX, or certainly business transformation, operational excellence. So we do work alongside them at certain points of the year, but we also have our own kind of standalone digital outfit, right? Where we produce on a monthly basis, sometimes more than once a month, our virtual webinar series. We call them All Access. which are, as you would, kind of imagine, normally 1 or 2 days of back-to-back sessions, back-to-back mini webinars, if you like, that will run throughout the day. And they're a combination of, they feature a combination of end user speakers. So normally people who, from quite big organizations who are leading teams doing the end user side. And we also work with a number of sponsors, vendors who also come on board and they take part in that speaking opportunity. And they normally have sessions as well where they're speaking about various trends, topics, whatever it is that the event happens to be on, right? Because generally, yes, exactly. Because every event has its own focus, be that BPM, be it process mining, process intelligence, AI, digital transformation. We try and cover as many bases as we can. So very much, what we do solely on PEX Network is digital based, and everything is virtual, either the content or the events that we do, or obviously the standalone webinars, which we do on a weekly, sometimes say more than one a week, again, virtual. But we do have that kind of touch point and that grounding of being part of a larger physical events company. And there's certain areas there where the two can support one another. You can learn off one another, and try to, certainly for the events that are focused on process or operational excellence, trying to kind of share or cultivate a shared audience who are looking for in-person events, of course, because they obviously deliver their own benefits and positives, but also mirroring that with a virtual online experience, which has its benefits as well in terms of being able to access things in different time zones, or you can't always get out of the office or travel to things, and you do things like we're doing now, right, virtually, is great.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that if I now then transfer a little bit to you as a person within PEX Network, I mean, you're the editor. How does a day-to-day look like for you? Just to take us through a day in the life of Michael.
Yeah. Good question. I mean, and part of the good thing about my job is that it can differ quite a bit from day to day, depending on what I'm working on. But generally, obviously, and this is kind of something that probably goes back to an element of journalism that I've always enjoyed, which is kind of news writing and, writing timely, quick pieces, right?
Yeah.
So I do produce, daily news articles now, sometimes three or four a day, short stories. So that's quite a big focus for me from an ungated sense. Always regularly working on different longer pieces, so feature articles, or what we've come to call listicles now, which are becoming very popular. It's interesting in that as a platform or media or content platform, things are evolving and changing quite a bit, and partially driven by AI and the impact that's having on traditional kind of search behaviors and what people are searching for, how they're searching, and the type of content they're looking for. We have to keep on top of that. So the type of content we produce has to evolve and stay up to date with that. So it's kind of continually looking at how we can keep up to date with that and produce content that's going to be both pleasing to the more traditional Google analytics, but also the kind of AI-driven search behaviors that are changing things a lot now.
What I'm thinking when I hear journalists, I see Bob Woodward or whatever the equivalent, Robert Redford in the Watergate movie, all president's men. You have your phone in the hand and you dial up your super secret sources. Is that how we can imagine your day-to-day life, or is it a little bit less dramatic?
Is it James Bond?
It's probably a little bit less romantic, and I mean, it's obviously, like I mentioned, that kind of B2B focus. It's not like tabloid, right? Where obviously you're getting these breaking stories and stuff on a regular basis, and all this kind of phone hacking stuff that you see. No, it's a little bit less romantic, like you say, than that. But then again, there are some, and the more that we've been tapping into news this year, there have been some big news stories that have broken, and I don't necessarily need to name any names, but so that's been interesting, and that's kind of has a snowball effect, I think, in terms of the more news that you cover, the deeper you dive into it, the more news you uncover, and the more you can make links between news stories. Something happens, and you think, you're liking this back to what happened last week, for example, or last month.
Yeah, and it also spreads out, So Caspar, don't listen right now. Just as an example, Salon is suing SAP, right? And then the question by users is raised like, who owns our damn data that's in the SAP system? I think now it's not just some conflict between two organizations. It's more like a generic, I don't dare to say philosophical question behind it. Like what role does a SaaS provider like SAP play for organizations, and who has the last say? I think this is super interesting, and it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with those two companies in this case.
You can substitute SAP with any other big platform in the cloud.
Yeah.
You got the same conversation. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Celonis with some other smaller vendors. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
Caspar.
of course.
I get it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's substitutable. Of course. It's just somebody needs to start this discussion somehow.
Yeah.
But just to touch on a couple other things as well, certainly on a day-to-day or at least a regular basis, and again, something I've been focused on over the last couple of years is building out, our community content. So, reaching out to, speaking to new contributors, right, that are coming from the industry, and that's something that's been, kind of real, something I've been kind of trying to drive and has gone very well, particularly this year, in terms of the amount of people who have come on board as new contributors, right, and are writing, unique content based on their own experiences, what they're doing in their organizations, even if they can't, write specifics about their company for various reasons. They can give an overview. They can give, their experience from a thought leadership perspective. And that's been great. And again, that's snowballed in terms of the more people that I've worked with who have come on board as new contributors. Not only have they turned into regular contributors, perhaps writing pieces monthly or more regularly, perhaps, but then they've got in touch with their peers or their friends who have then reached out to me and said, "Oh, hey, I'd love to have the opportunity to write some pieces to publish on PEX." So that's been another thing that I spend quite a bit of time, speaking to people. We kind of align a general kind of outline or a pitch idea or something they want to write. They spend a bit of time, penning it, sending it to me. I obviously review that, edit it, put it into house style and things like that. And then there's a lot of scheduling involved in terms of what content is going to run when. So yeah, I produce a lot of content, but there's also a certain element of, like I say, scheduling and arranging what's going to run when, what's going to fit when, what times we're looking at. News is obviously very time sensitive, right? So sometimes I'm working on a report, say an industry report, which sometimes, from start to finish can take up to, 2 months sometimes to initially kick off the writing process, the design process, working generally with the sponsoring vendor as well, speaking to different people. But then a news story pops up and then you think, right, okay, I need to just maybe put the report on ice for an hour and go and write this news story, speak to a source or two to get some comments or reaction, think about how you're going to link this to other content that we've got. So yeah, quite a lot of moving pieces really. And but the great thing is, and this particularly with news, every day is kind of different in its own way. You never quite know what you're going to be covering, and news is unpredictable, right? Sometimes some weeks are quieter, some weeks are busy. And yeah, a couple of names you mentioned there has been a big story this year, right? And that's been several different shifts, and that story's evolved, right? And it's still evolving. And I think it's going to be an interesting to look to see what happens next year with that. And I think, beyond process excellence or whatever, it's on a wider sphere, like you said, Roland. It asks a lot of questions, just more generally from a business sense, from a user sense. The ramifications of these, potential issues affects a lot of people. So, so yeah, it's busy. I love, interviewing leaders, and we've got an interview section where we interview prominent names in the industry, and on topics or more personal stuff about them, and write interviews and publish interviews on the site. And also another part of it, which is the working on a lead gen side of things, in terms of working with sponsors and vendors who pay for sponsored content. Okay, how do we go about crafting that? It's one thing to create a report or to work on a webinar or a white paper, but at the core of what we do is still that kind of thought leadership, high quality content that has the editorial quality, that our audience expect, because our audience are, by and large, business leaders, and they want content they can trust. And building trust in your platform, your content takes time, and it also, it's something that you can earn it, but you can easily lose it. You need to be careful that you maintain that.
Before we go into the break, right? Because I'm pretty sure some people are just getting a little bit of an overfill now. But I would love to get your perspective, and that might be a twofold question: a more personal question, but also a question for the organization, for PEX. Where do you see your slash PEX's future, from now? I think you're well established. If someone hasn't heard of you, then they must live behind a rock. But obviously, there's
Yeah.
always something in the future, right? And again, twofold. Where do you see the organization go? Where do you see you as an individual go?
Yeah. No, great question. I think definitely in terms of, what we do, what we produce, we are seeing a shift, right? And we are in the process of reacting to that in terms of content that we produce and how we package it and what we do, because things are changing. And again, it's, it don't necessarily get into too deeply here, but the AI bubble is affecting that in terms of how people take in content. So, and we are looking to react to that in terms of the amount of kind of video content that we put out needs to increase, because again, that's something that people are becoming more accustomed to and expect more. And even just down to the written content that we produce, we're changing the style and how we craft written content so that it still keeps that quality, but taps into these, very much AI-driven search engines that are here or coming, right? So it changes things. Now, on a wider perspective, I think and I think maybe this has been kind of something that's been happening for a while, but certainly broadening out our target audience slightly to take into the fact that how much is now coming into that PEX sphere of AI, automation, digital twins, general business, how we're kind of shifting perhaps from a more traditional operational excellence stance more to a more holistic business transformation position, and what that actually means. I think, and how things like AI, automation, inevitably fit into that, but how? And that's, I think there's probably a larger audience pool that we can reach out to, specifically around AI, perhaps around data as well, that we, we're still trying to tap into more and attract more. Because again, it's just growing at incredible speed. But whilst to try to keep that grounding of process excellence, I think is what we're aiming. But certainly, new types of content is something that we're looking at and bringing.
Yeah, and I think that well, that's a whole conversation in itself. AI as a pure technical exercise is doomed, I guess. You need to embed it in a process, because otherwise you produce a thing that users either don't use or produces more noise than it's worth it, as we currently see. So I hope that the bubble deflates slowly and does not burst. But yeah, there will be some realignment, I guess. But I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. So with that, I think we take a little break, and obviously no break without a homework for our listeners, and the first one is, I made the assumption that everybody knows who PEX Network is. Well, the question is, dear listeners, do you? Do you use the content that Michael and his colleagues produce, and how valuable is it for you? Right. And if you have that, please send us notes and send Michael notes, so that obviously they can improve. And with that, we leave you alone for a moment and come back with our second part.
All right, welcome back after the break with our interview with Michael Hill from PEX Network. Michael, we touched on a lot of topics in part one of this podcast episode. What I'm wondering, I mean, the PEX Network feeds and provides content to multiple different types of communities, right? And you have different formats and different channels in which that you use to bring that content to the community. Do you see that there are differences between, for instance, a written word or a video or a webinar, and how that reaches different types of communities? Take us through a little bit on how you think that is, if there's a correlation or not.
Yeah, great question. I think there is. I think definitely, people who join and watch a 50-minute webinar may not necessarily be so engaged with a news story, for example, generally. And this is a little bit, I'm going a little bit about my take here, what I think. But what we do see, and this is one of the kind of USPs I think that we do have across PEX, particularly when we're looking, when we're speaking to sponsors who are looking to kind of partner with us, is that we do have quite strong multi-touch across our audience. And then what we do see some quite promising percentages of people that do attend an all access event one day, do then also come to a related webinar in 2 weeks' time. And then they do normally download an associated or similar report a month later that comes out on the same topic. So I think a lot of it's topic based. So if we're, if people, for example, are more focused on BPM, for example, and we've got our BPM series, and they come to that, they're the people that we would expect and target to, and organically normally do then download perhaps our yearly BPM report, or we would expect them to touch and see a BPM news story and look at that. Whereas if they're an AI leader, perhaps not. But I think just generally, right? I think this goes across, and I think this is just modern media and publishing in itself. There are definitely people who want to read shorter news stories. Every piece of content that we produce now has a listen to function in, because some people prefer to listen to to content rather than read it, right? So that's an important thing that we do. We're also looking to try and embed more, and I guess this is where you could kind of touch on what AI can do. Can we kind of do more to kind of automatically transfer content into some sort of video format that isn't super time intensive for us to do as a team, so people can have the choice whether they want to read it, listen to it, or watch it. I think that's kind of where we're going, what we're looking at.
So what I have in my mind is like a spreadsheet. You have the different formats, text and videos and podcasts and whatever, right? And then you have your different topics, process, AI, blah blah blah. Do you see patterns there? So to me, your answer sounds more like, well, it's still the vertical one, the topic that drives the different engagement. But do you see, when you take the horizontal look of it, do you see that some of your audiences react more to, say, videos, while others react more to whatever, your events or whatever? Or is that comparable, right? So are people the same no matter what the topic is, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I think certainly, definitely our biggest, kind of drivers of engagement are generally our monthly virtual events. I think they probably have the most engagement. I think that there's a reason for that is two or threefold. They generally feature speakers from big companies, so quite big draws. We've got 3 or 4 big end user companies. I don't know name any, but big companies. That's a draw. And you've got senior end leaders speaking on an opening panel, and they're speaking honestly about things. That's quite a big draw. We also put more significant marketing efforts into things like that because we have longer to do so, right? And we're also, not just because of the content side, but we're also normally looking to meet certain requirements and goals in terms of engagement and registration and things like that. Also the amount of content. If we look at an event, we may have 4 or 5 sessions back to back, and you may have 20 different speakers across that whole day, perhaps. If you're looking at, so there's a lot of people who you can engage with. They then on their own platforms, LinkedIn, where they are engaging and saying, "Hey, I'm speaking at this event. Make sure you come along and be there and see
Join
me speaking."
Yeah.
So that helps. That helps, and I think we see a smaller but more regular views and visits for kind of news, because we were producing 3 or 4 news stories every day. Features, longer pieces tend to have a longer shelf life, if you like, that the news will drive a short amount of traffic for a week, then it will kind of die off because another news story is coming. Not always, obviously, but generally. Whereas, and this is where it comes in terms of kind of how you're crafting the content and being very careful to craft evergreen content that's going to drive maybe more modest traffic on a weekly basis, but it's going to do so over a longer period. Maybe even, we've got some pieces of content which are several years old that still drive a lot of traffic. And that's a combination of the topic, but also how it's crafted, how strong it is from an SEO perspective, and stuff. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but there definitely are some patterns and traits. And we know generally what content will drive traffic in the short term, but then die off. But then what content will drive traffic for a longer period, and we know how that works now.
Do you see patterns evolving? I just read an article yesterday on LinkedIn where a person was just saying like, isn't it interesting how every 5 to 7 years we realize that we have to deliver value to our end customers? So 15 years it was this, 10 years ago it was this, 5 years ago it was this. Now we realize AI needs to bring value to the end customer, not customer, to the end customer as well. But yeah, it's like, do you see patterns evolving like this? Because I found that article very entertaining. Right? Oh yeah, it's the same thing, different clothes. Do you see that in your reporting, or is it always a straight line forward to the bright future?
I'd say that it's true what you're saying in that there's a general trend in the same. Things are changing and shifting, but what I think is different about now with AI is it's kind of doing it on steroids, right? Where it's driving things quicker and more significantly, more volatilely. And I don't think there's any better example with that, particularly looking at what we do in terms of the shift from how people are searching for and accessing content. There's quite a lot of data out there about the impact of or the how drastically the number of searches that never lead to a click is just going up so significantly, where people are searching on Google, they're putting a question in, and they're using the AI summary at the top to get their answer before even clicking onto a site. So, the impact that's having on traditionally organic traffic, I think if you can read anything, is changing between 30 to 60%, I think, in terms of how much it's dipping. In terms of organic Google-based search traffic is changing. And a big part of that is AI, and that's changing not only, like I mentioned earlier, how people are searching for content, but the type of content that these AI platforms like to put at the top of their results is different than perhaps traditional Google search. And coming into it as well, certain platforms like to prioritize certain types of content as well, which adds another level as well. But definitely 100%, things are changing quicker than because of AI, but there's still a trajectory of things just evolving, right? Audience wants and needs in terms of how people want content. They want generally shorter, accessible content, and they want more options in how they access it. And they don't just want to read it. If they just want to listen to it, they can listen to it. If they want to watch it, they can watch it. So things are shifting a lot in that.
Just to hook on to that one, Michael, because what you're now describing is, of course, the people in the community that actually consume the content that you put out, and I would like to dive into that one a little bit. I mean, PEX Network, as far as I know, has quite a large community of people that are interested in the topic around process excellence in general, which nowadays becomes a little bit more vague, I would say, and a little bit broader. But can you take us through a little bit on what type of people do you attract into your community, and more importantly, I guess also, how do you keep them? I mean, the average attention span of a person, the younger they are, the shorter it is nowadays.
Yeah.
So who are you after, and how do you keep them?
Yeah. No, yeah, great question. I mean, and our kind of membership is, going up all the time, right? And that's kind of a steady but consistent increase. I know we're pushing up somewhere towards around, pushing up to 200,000, members and things.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people are regularly, consuming our content and stuff. And we are seeing a bit of a shift in terms of who we're attracting. We've got our core audience of process leaders, but like you mentioned there is a blurring of the lines now in terms of you getting all these different tech aspects and factors coming into that, and looking to attract more AI leaders, data leaders, change management, as even though you could say that's an older topic, right? We still see so much engagement with that in terms of managing change is still the biggest challenge and stuff that so many leaders face. And again, I think that's just been bolstered by AI. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. So in terms of keeping the audience, and I think this is a really important piece, and this comes down to content that you're producing, how often you're producing it, and the trust level there is that we put a lot of time and effort and dedication into our content being reliable and trustworthy, um, in terms of how it's crafted, our voice, but also using, ensuring that editorial focus remains core throughout our content, whatever we're doing. That editorial integrity piece has to be very important. That's a big part of building trust. And like I said, that takes time. I think in terms of how you keep people coming back as well, like I say, we do a lot of work on behind the scenes from a marketing sense in that, try and capture as much data or freely given data as we can in terms of what people are looking for, what their roles are, what their interest is, and then tailoring how we, not only the content that we produce, but how we market certain content to certain people based on the information they've freely given us, right? So what they're
Yeah.
looking for. So if they are interested in 2 or 3 topics, okay, we know we've got different touch points in some quite diverse types of content throughout the year. It could be a PDF report, it could be a, all
Yep.
access event, a webinar, a white paper, or just news story. Tailoring that to certain criteria based on what they're telling us and what we've gathered from them is very important. I think that helps. So, trying to cut down on trying to send out less marketing, but more targeted quality marketing for what people we know they want. I think that keeps people coming back because then they feel that we're crafting things for them. It's more a personal experience. I think it's another shift in what people want out of content. They want a more personal experience.
But just to follow on with that one, I mean, I've been a member of the community for PEX Network for many years now, and if I look into what comes into my mailbox in general first, I mean, there's a lot of marketing and advertisement and trying to tease me into buying something or being part of something. But what I remember from and what I experienced from the PEX Network is that usually the things that come in are quite to the point, and they're much more an invitation to contribute and to join rather than we want something from you. It feels much more like you have expertise that we would like to give you a platform for. And I think that's what I like. And I'm not sure, Roland, if you have the same experience, but that's at least my experience when dealing with
No,
PEX Network.
nobody invites me, Caspar. That makes me sad now. I feel like pushback. No,
Okay,
just
so
kidding.
we'll get to the influencer topic, Roland. Don't worry.
Yeah. So no, but in all seriousness, that is when I think about this, and Caspar, you spoiled it right now.
Oh, sorry.
When you see marketing, and I said it in the break, which obviously nobody has heard because you listen to music. I was reading a book over the weekend, which is called The Attention Machine. Right, and the story is it's written by a guy who had a very popular tech channel on YouTube, and he's talking about how does all that influencing thing work? What was his ideas to grow or to build a channel in the first place, and how the incentives works and all that type of stuff. Maybe I'm a little bit naive, but I haven't seen that to that degree with B2B publications, if you will, but I'm pretty sure this stuff does exist as well. Does it, Michael?
It does, and I think it's a good point. And I think again, traditionally, and this is a new thing. Any B2B publisher, any publisher, any media platform has always been driven and influenced greatly by things like Google Analytics in terms of looking at what search terms are popular, what keywords people are looking for, what traffic's performing well, what's dipped slightly, how do we react to that? And that's still the case. That's still the case in essence. And Google Analytics still plays quite a large role in that. Things are changing in terms of how AI is impacting how people search for content. For the first time ever, Google Google search use is going down. The number of Google searches that don't ever lead to an actual physical click is going up. Obviously, people are using the AI summary that you can use to get their answers for certain things. What they're asking is different. People are asking questions rather than just putting in a topic and things. So they're looking for more direct answers. So all of those things do impact the content you're producing, and how you're producing it. It's we're looking at that like any other publisher, whether it's B2B or not, because Ultimately we're governed by our audience and what they're looking for. We have a number of key search terms that are really important to us and always have been. If they're continually performing strongly, great. If we're seeing a dip and we think, oh, actually we need to shift and adjust our content strategy to be producing more content to drive that back up. If we've got certain campaigns, certain events that we're running at certain times of the year, then we should be producing more content around that topic around the time of the event, again, to just try and drive that engagement.
Yeah, that's not exactly the question, and obviously the blame is all on me. That's not exactly the question that I wanted to ask you, and Caspar is too humble to chime in here, but you obviously give people their star of approval, PEX thought leader or whatever the title is that you give, so you highlight certain people, right? Which obviously boosts them, and boosts their standing in the community, if you will, so Caspar can polish it twice a day so that it looks good on his LinkedIn. Oh yeah, you polished that one too.
Yeah.
But anyway, so how does that work? One could ask the question. So maybe first of all, why do you do this? Second, why is that important? And maybe third one is, well, what is the game here?
Okay, you're talking about the leaders list that we produce, right?
For example,
yes.
yeah. For example,
yeah.
Okay, and they're a great example of a few different things. First and foremost, which I've mentioned earlier, is that community focus, right? We want to be continually building our community and our brand in line with the community, and we feel that the leaders lists are a good way to do that in recognizing people in the industry that we think are doing great work or make a difference and things. The second reason we do it is because and this is just quite a basic approach to it, right? Is we find that they are very well received. They drive a lot of traffic. Generally, they're some of our higher traffic drivers for the year. These lists of 30, 50 leaders. Part of the reason there is because you can do so much social media activity. I think kind of like LinkedIn is such a big platform now, particularly for us, and I think it's in terms of how a site or platform's reputation, or how it builds its reputation. Things like mentions on, or tags in LinkedIn, mentions of social media is having a big impact now, and this is partly driven in terms of, again, the AI change in terms of how websites are ranked by a quality perspective is changing, and it's edging a bit more towards mentioned sites and stuff, and you're getting different people who have their own networks. If you've got people that got large networks, they're tagging they're tagging PEX in a post and saying, hey, I want to celebrate, or they're celebrating me, goes out to their platform. It's a way of perhaps tapping into people that maybe you wouldn't have been able to do previously. So that's another kind of aspect of it. We find that people engage with them a lot. And I think this is kind of, it's like any sort of award scheme or any kind of like recognition scheme. If it's done, handled in the right way, and people trust it and they think it's a reliable list of people, or at least the thinking behind it is reliable and precise. It's a way for people to meet new peers and network and to be inspired by others. And I think everyone likes to be recognized and to get that recognition on their name in terms of the work
for
they're
sure.
doing.
Yeah, for sure. When we got the nice word out, Caspar, you got for your podcast, and I got it for ours here.
Yeah.
That obviously created a smile. Oh yeah, we made the list of the 10 most important whatever podcasts in the world. Like, ooh, great. Of course. Yeah,
it's a wonderful feeling. I got to be honest. And the first time it happened to me, I didn't even know it happened until people started congratulating me on LinkedIn. It's like, why are they congratulating me? And then I saw the list.
Yeah. And I think what that does is, it inspires other people. The amount of people that we have reach out to us who are coming to us maybe for the first time and saying, hey, I'd love to be featured on, how do I get featured on this list? How can I do it? Again, and that just builds out our brand, our community, our members.
I could have bribed. Michael, is that what you're saying?
No, Roland.
No, just kidding.
No.
I did not bribe. I was happily surprised to be on that list.
we try to keep
our little
ethical
podcast.
Here. Yeah. But just, we talked about earlier, I think it came up really really briefly, but I mean, you're working with vendors as well in your content cycle. So can you take us through a little bit how that works? I mean, obviously you have sponsored publications in there and speaking slots, and what kind of opportunities do you have, and how do they resonate in the community?
Yeah, yeah. So obviously, there's a huge reality to what we do in terms of, revenue, right? If we,
Yeah,
we can't survive on content alone, right? And we know that the
yeah, of
bulk of
course.
our revenue comes from working with sponsors and vendors who take out generally lead campaigns, but not always lead gen campaigns. And there's a range that we offer, and these cover things like industry reports, yes, the webinars and the all access virtual events, sponsored blogs, white papers, even just your general standard advertising, right? It's all quite a wide spectrum of things that we offer. Um, and first and foremost, we see that as very much a partnership with any sponsor that we work with, right? We essentially we want to they have a goal and an aim, and generally it would be get some high quality leads that they can hopefully follow up with and see have success and get some business from. Fair enough. And our aim is to facilitate that in keeping with our wider content, almost so that our readers, our viewers feel that they can't necessarily tell whether what they're reading is a sponsored piece of content or a non-sponsored piece of content. It has to have that same quality, that same approach,
Yeah,
that same feel to it, and that's very important to us. And that's something that we, quite open and honest about when we speak with vendors. And by and large, vendors agree with that because they want high quality leads. And to get that, you need a high quality audience, and to get a high quality audience, you need an audience that trusts your content. So it's a
yeah,
circular thing.
yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, so we work very closely with sponsors, and now they're a big part of what we do. And there's a lot of great ones that we work with, have done for years. And yeah, and they really contribute a lot. And it's and quite what that looks like depending on the type of content will be different. There's some things that I'm directly involved with in terms of anything kind of more written, particularly reports and blogs and things like that. I have a colleague of mine that works more on the events side from a production perspective, that works with vendors to kind of craft the webinars and the sessions. But generally, the aim is the same, right? We want to make sponsors happy. We want to make our audience happy, and hopefully lead to ongoing partnership. And that's what we've been able to do with a lot of the sponsors and stuff in the space. And this is this conversation is a perfect example. There's a lot of really talented, knowledgeable people that work for vendors that know the space really well, right? And they're a huge source of uh, context, insight for me and us as well. So I may be working on a non-sponsored piece of content, a news story, and I'll happily go reach out to somebody who works for a vendor, but they're an expert in the space. They've been working in the space for 20 years. And they're kind of one of the leading names. You can look at our leaders lists, and there's representatives of some of vendors on there, not because they're paying to be on there. Our lists aren't paid for at all. But we feel they offer the same thought leadership and insight as
Yeah.
people,
Mhm.
non-vendors as well. So that's important to us. Because at the end of the day, and this is another thing that we know, and this is why in our news coverage, we will cover things like new software releases, software updates, and things, is because we know a huge amount of our audience use these platforms because they're process leaders. So they use a lot of these. So they want to know if there's a new platform coming out, if there's platform updates, been changes to a platform. We know they want to know about it, and that reflects in our traffic and viewers to news stories that are on platforms and software and stuff. So yeah, it's a big part of what we do working with vendors.
And I think it's perfectly legitimate, because you need to
Yeah,
put food on the table as well. You don't do this
of
from
course.
the bottom of your heart. So, and I think you do a good job to make it transparent, right? So that people see, oh yeah, this is a sponsored piece, or this is a genuine news article, or whatever, all the products that you bring to the table. Let's take a little break again, right? I think we're well into the episode. But while you're listening to the music, the audience, I'm thinking about how have you valued publications? How have you made the distinction between, okay, do I get something sold to me that's paid for versus the true news, the true new stuff? And how do you cross those two things in your mind? Do you think it's okay? Do you think it's too much? Do you think it's not enough? How do you see that? So we'll leave you for a moment and we'll come back with our third section in a sec.
Love won't let you down, won't let you down. Yeah, hey, yeah, I need your love won't let you down. Hey, yeah, I need your love won't let you down, won't let you down.
All right, welcome back to the last part of this episode. Michael, we went over a various couple of interesting topics in the last couple of parts, and we talked about the different types of content and channels that you have, and we dove deep into the communities that you have within PEX and how you work with them and how you involve also the vendor side, or the sponsor side, as I should say, in that. It's been really an interesting journey so far. And as Roland tries to always tease me with that, I'm going to ask you an incredibly hard journalistic question now: is how can people reach you? What's the easiest way for people to get into contact with you? And whatever else you would like to share on the side of PEX Network.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Great stuff. Well, I'm reaching me. LinkedIn, I think, is probably the best way, right? It's
Surprising answer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what else to say on that? Yeah, reach out on LinkedIn, and again, like I mentioned before, it's I love hearing from people that get in touch and want to contribute to PEX. That's what we're all about, and we're always looking for new voices, or if we have contributed perhaps in the past and haven't done for a while and come back, we see a lot of that as well. So always looking to bring as many voices from the community to the platform. So yeah, always get in touch with me, or just the PEX Network page on LinkedIn as well. You can reach out. It'll come through to me eventually anyway. So yeah, so do feel free to.
And all those links will be in the show notes. So the usual PSA, don't take notes while driving. So you can read them in the show notes. Focus on the traffic.
Yeah.
So, Michael, what's next then for PEX? I'm pretty sure we will all celebrate this episode when it's out. So, and 5 minutes later, there's the next thing that you have to do. So what's next for you in 2026 and for PEX in the nearer future?
Yeah. Well, I think the big thing to kick off the year for us is our first all access event of 2026. The first one takes place in February 10th, I believe. And that is the future of BPM. So I really like this event. Obviously, a BPM is a big topic for us. We run a separate BPM event, which is kind of our flagship event later in the year. But what I like about future of BPM is it's very much focused on, okay, what do we think is coming in the future, as the name suggests, right? What do you think is coming next? So it's not necessarily just BPM, what's happening right now. We're looking ahead to look at some of the big trends, some of the key predictions of what we think the future of BPM is going to look like. So if it's a really good way to start off the year of events for us, we really excited about this one. So do register for that one. There's the page is open now on the site, so you can get registered for that one ahead of the event, and then there'll be a number of speakers joining us for that, a mixture of end user speakers and some vendor representatives as well, for what should be a really great day. So yeah, if you're into BPM's your thing, which I'm sure it is if you're listening to this, make sure you come along to that event.
We definitely will dial in. I'm pretty sure Caspar will speak again because he loves the spotlight. But anyway,
if there's an opportunity, for sure.
Of course. But having said that, Michael, thank you very, very much for being a guest today. And I hope, dear audience, you got your share of information out of this episode, how PEX works, or in general how B2B journalism works, and I hope you met a nice lad, that you're happy to reach out to if you want to be a contributor to the PEX network. As always, all those links, all that stuff that we just said, you will find it in the show notes. So it's whatsyourbaseline.com/episode 105. Thanks for being a good listenership to us, right? So, and obviously I have to ask you to do all the favors, press those magic buttons wherever you see them, like subscribe and bells and whatever, right? But maybe more importantly, and that's really dear to my heart, If you could tell 5 of your best friends about this little podcast that could, right, that would be very much appreciated. And with that, I've been Roland Wolt.
I've been Michael Hill.
And I've been Caspar Jans.
And we will see you in the next one.